The 7 best dividend ETFs to buy and hold. Let's go. Hey everyone, I'm Sean with The Modest Wallet. Thanks so much for checking out the channel and more specifically checking out the 7 best dividend ETFs to buy and hold.
Buy it, hold it, and dream your dream.
If you're not sure what a dividend ETF is, we're talking about a fund that has a bunch of stocks inside that pay dividends. So when you own the fund, you will earn dividends based on the stocks contained or tracked in the fund. Dividend ETFs will slightly be a more conservative approach to dividend investing because of the diversity these funds bring to your portfolio. As we look at these funds, we will explore what each of these ETFs is going to track, the main objective of the ETF, how many holdings each ETF has, and the top 5 holdings, as well as dividend yield and the expense ratio for each fund. I know that sounds like a lot. Trust me, it's really not. It's going to give you a good idea of whether these ETFs are right for you. Also, I'm not a financial advisor, so make sure you do your own research. The first dividend ETF on the list is the Vanguard High Dividend Yield Index ETF, ticker symbol VYM. This dividend ETF tracks the performance of the FTSE High Dividend Yield Index, which measures the investment return of common stocks of companies characterized by high dividend yields. The main objective of this ETF is to provide a convenient way to track the performance of stocks that are forecasted to have above average dividend yields. This ETF has 410 holdings, meaning that 410 stocks make up this fund, with its top 5 holdings in Procter & Gamble, Bank of America, Home Depot, Johnson & Johnson, and JP Morgan Chase. The top 10 holdings in this fund make up over 23% of the fund's total net assets. The dividend yield is currently 2.72%, meaning that if I had $100 invested in this ETF, I would make $2.72 that year on my $100. The expense ratio is a mere 0.06%. This is well below the average expense ratio. And for a $10,000 investment, you would only pay $142 over the course of 10 years. And if you're not really sure what that means, this is really unbelievable and will give you a baseline or something to compare with the rest of these dividend ETFs that we're going to be discussing. The last thing I want to share are some of the growth numbers for this fund. So definitely check that out on the screen because we don't want to forget about growth, as our main focus is on the dividend yields or those cash payments you get when you own dividend ETFs. The second dividend ETF on the list is the Vanguard Dividend Appreciation ETF, ticker symbol VIG. This dividend ETF tracks the performance of the S&P US Dividend Growers Index. It's a large cap equity, so it's focusing on those massive companies, emphasizing stocks with a record of growing their dividends year over year. This fund has 268 holdings, with its top 5 holdings in Home Depot, Johnson & Johnson, United Health Group Incorporated, JP Morgan Chase, and capping it off with Microsoft. Also, just over 30% of its net holdings are in those top 10 companies that you see on the screen. The dividend yield is currently 1.62%, which is dispersed quarterly throughout the year. The expense ratio is 0.06%, and just to put that in perspective of what a good deal that is, if you invested $10,000 over 10 years, once again, it would only cost you $142. I'm not going to stop there. Here you can see how this fund has grown over the last several months and years, because you definitely don't want to get yourself in a fund, once again, that has great numbers when it comes to dividend yield, but it's sacrificed as the NAV would go down or decrease over time. The third dividend ETF that we're going to look at today is the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, ticker symbol SCHD. This dividend ETF tracks the total return of the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index. It has 105 holdings, with its top 5 consisting of Pepsi, Merck, Pfizer, Broadcom, and Home Depot. The Schwab US Dividend Equity Fund has over $30 billion in assets, with 40% of its net assets in the top 10 companies that make up the fund. The dividend yield is 2.99%. The expense ratio for this fund is once again 0.06%, which seems to be the common theme so far. Here's also a quick look at the growth in the short term and long term for SCHD. You can definitely get more in-depth numbers in their prospectus, so make sure you definitely check that out. Next on our list is the SPDR S&P Dividend ETF, ticker symbol SDY. This dividend ETF tracks the total return performance of the S&P High Yield Dividend Aristocrats Index. The main objective of this fund is that it screens for companies that have consistently increased the dividend for at least 20 consecutive years and weights the stock by yield. It has 114 holdings, with its top 5 being National Retail Properties Incorporated, AbbVie, Chevron, Exxon, and AT&T. The top 10 stocks in this fund make up just over 14% of the net assets of it. Moving right along, the dividend yield is 2.49%. The expense ratio is 0.35%. This means if you invested $10,000, you would pay $35 annually in fees. So far, this dividend ETF has the highest expense ratio, but still below the market average, and really is quite impressive. Also, you can't forget about what it has done in regards to capital growth, because as I mentioned before, you want funds to not only pay that dividend, but also appreciate in value. We are pumping these out. Next on the list is the iShares Core Dividend Growth ETF, ticker symbol DGRO. The main objective of this fund is to track the investment results of an index composed of U.S. equities with a history of consistently growing those dividends. It has 389 holdings, with the top 5 being Procter & Gamble, JP Morgan, Pfizer, Apple, and Microsoft. The top 10 holdings in this fund make up more than 26% of its net assets. The dividend yield is 2.02%. The expense ratio is 0.08%. This fund really has experienced some nice capital appreciation over the years, so I'll share that on my screen so you can see for yourself. Another nice dividend ETF to consider for your portfolio. Next on the list is the ProShares S&P 500 Dividend Aristocrats ETF, ticker symbol NOBL. You might be more familiar with this one. This dividend ETF tracks the S&P 500 Dividend Aristocrats, which are highly quality companies that have not just paid dividends, but grown them for at least 25 consecutive years, with most doing so for 40 years or more. The main objective of this fund is really weathering the market turbulence over time by capturing most of the gains of rising markets and fewer of the losses in falling markets. This fund has quite less holdings. It has 65 holdings, with the top 5 being Franklin Resources Incorporated, W.W. Granger Incorporated, Nucor Corp, Albemarle Corp, and Smith Corp. So these aren't really the stock names that you typically hear about, although the big ones, or the ones we have mentioned, have mentioned in the past, are definitely part of this fund as well. So just don't get caught up in those top 5. I definitely think that does make this ETF maybe a little different from the others, because the top 5 are names really that you've never heard of. The dividend yield is 1.87%. The expense ratio is 0.35%. Displayed on the screen are the 1-year, 3-year, 5-year, and since inception annualized growth of this fund. Definitely better than average growth rates, so definitely check that out. Last but not least on our screen is the iShares Core High Dividend ETF, ticker symbol HDV. This dividend ETF tracks the investment results of an index composed of relatively high dividend-paying U.S. equities. The main objective of this fund is to gain access to 75 different paying domestic stocks that have been screened for financial health. So it has 75 holdings, with the top 5 being AbbVie Incorporated, Johnson & Johnson, Chevron, AT&T, and ExxonMobil. The top 10 holdings actually make up more than 50% of its total holdings, which is far more than any of the other funds we mentioned in this video. So there are still 75 stocks making up this fund, but we can easily see the top 10 companies are relied on much more as they are heavily weighted. The dividend yield is 3.86%. The expense ratio is 0.08%. One thing I noticed here with this fund is that it has a very healthy dividend yield of 3.86%, but the annualized returns are definitely not as high, which is one thing I always like to caution people about when investing in dividend-paying stocks or ETFs. All right, so I'm now going to summarize the 7 best dividend ETFs so that you can see how these compare in regards to dividend yield and expense ratios. While these funds may not seem like a huge deal or that there's not much disparity, it may be of some use for you to see that displayed on one page as you think about investing money year over year and in the future. Also to note about these companies, and I didn't really stress it a ton, but looking not just at their dividend yield, but also at the fund's growth is a critical metric you want to consider as you look to invest in dividend ETFs. And I did try to, at the end of each of those dividend ETFs, kind of show on the screen their annualized return rates. I hope you found value in this video. If you did, smash that like button. Also, don't forget to consider subscribing. It costs you nothing and it really helps me out. Let us know what dividend ETFs you're investing in. Maybe let us know maybe some that we might have left off of this list. Also, if you have any questions about dividend investing, make sure you drop that below and we can try to respond to any of those questions that you might have. I'm headed out now, but thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.